Alright, it is finally that time for us to look at the changes for the Prydwen tier list for Honkai Star Rail, and oh, believe me, there have been some changes. So, like I have in the past couple of videos, I'm just going to go over the changes here. Not going to spend time going over the whole tier list, because that's going to take forever. But we do have some pretty crazy changes. The big things, of course, being the introduction of Sunday into the game. And I'm going to have my own like endgame kind of showcase video like I always do for the characters coming out in the next few days. But I have tested him out just a little bit. I am recording this the day that he, the morning after he came out, because he came out at night in my time zone. But let's just talk about it overall with all the changes. We will kind of just go in order from DPSs moving on. So, but I definitely will get to Sunday, and I'm going to talk about every change that they have done on the list here. So, starting out with the damage dealers, the DPS section here. We have the first two moves here. We have Doctor Ratio dropping down to tier 1 and Jing Yuan moving up to tier 1. Now, for Doctor Ratio, I kind of saw this coming because, for one, there are just better follow-up characters now. Like, we have Yun Li, we have Topaz, we have Fei Xiao. So I kind of expected Doctor Ratio to fall a little bit, especially since he is single target as well. And single target and also being a bit older of a character, since Fei Xiao is the newest single target kind of DPS. So it does make sense that he is kind of falling a little bit, but he is still a very capable character as long as you do play around having some debuffs on the field so that he can get his follow-up attacks off. Now, as for Jing Yuan, I 100% expected him to go up, and it's all because of Sunday, right? But I honestly didn't think Jing Yuan was going to go to tier 1. I thought they would slot him in tier 1.5. And we're going to talk about her in a second too, because that is something that is a little crazy to me. But Jing Yuan moving up, I think is entirely justified. I honestly didn't think that even with him at E0 S0 and Sunday at E0 S0 would be enough for tier 1. But he is just way better. Now, I don't have like the most experience with Jing Yuan in the world since I don't have him. But when I did the aptitude showcase where we get to test out the banner characters, Sunday's aptitude showcase also had Jing Yuan, so I got to see the difference, and the difference between Sunday's and Jing Yuan's in terms of Jing Yuan's performance is like night and day. Like, Sunday is just such a crazy character for him that Jing Yuan he's kind of cooking right now. We'll see if he stays as high as he is once we get the actual like remembrance path and we get more summon characters that might be able to better take advantage of Sunday as well. Because I feel like once Jing Yuan gets kicked off of the Sunday team, it might be over for him. I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, good for him though. And shout out to the people who have been waiting for Jing Yuan to get that really massive buff, because he's gotten like a bunch of like mini buffs here and there with characters, but I think Sunday is probably the biggest buff he's gotten so far, since it pretty much just fixes the biggest problems with Jing Yuan's kit. So yeah, that's it for Jing Yuan. Let's move on down to the one that I had to take a second glance at. Jingliu is in tier 2, and that's below Blade. Now this is, once again, this is only for MOC. I do really just like talk about the MOC one, since that is like the main endgame mode that the community looks at. Obviously, Pure Fiction and Apocalyptic Shadow are important too, because they all are like endgame modes, but MOC is the one that's always in the limelight and has been in the game for the longest. So Jingliu, I think that their main reasoning for putting Jingliu down to tier 2 is just because of the lack of endgame enemies for MOC being catered towards her kit. We haven't seen really as many ice weaknesses recently, which I mean kind of makes sense because we haven't really had like an ice DPS character. And because of that, they did drop her down here to tier 2. I think tier 2 is honestly a little bit of a stretch. Now I get that there are a bit more wind weak characters, especially with Fei Xiao, so that is kind of keeping Blade up here. But it is pretty crazy to see Jingliu below Blade. And I kind of want to make a video at some point talking about like which characters were power creeped the most and which ones like aged the best. Jingliu is a character that I'm kind of realizing now is a character that has definitely fallen victim to power creep, which, as unfortunate as it is, she's a DPS, so it was bound to happen. But it is crazy seeing her even below Blade, who Blade has had his own situation with power creep. He's chilling right now, but I think once the wind weak enemies start being less common, he's probably gonna fall down as well. But yeah, we'll see what happens for Jingliu. But I think even with Sunday, she is being more and more cooked each version we get. Then we get to tier 3, we have both Sela and QQ moving down here, and both of them makes a lot of sense to me why they move down. For Sela, not only is she single target, but she's also an extremely old character, the first limited 1.0 release. So considering that not only have other DPSs come out since then, like a bunch of them, but they are all way better, and especially ones that came out after 2.0, those characters have way more mechanics, way better multipliers for things, also self buffs. So because of that, Sela does kind of struggle, especially since her kit is revolving around getting the final hit on an enemy before they die, so you can get her resurgence up. So because it's a lot harder to get resurgence up with the whole HP, situation that we have in Star Rail's endgame, Sela really just struggles a lot of the time, and it's really just not worth using her in a lot of situations. Now, as for QQ, like early on in Star Rail, she was a 4-star that performed pretty well in comparison to a lot of the 4-stars, and was honestly, like, before we got the big DPS power creep, the first big DPS power creep with Imbibitor and Jingliu, QQ was one of the better DPS characters in the game. And she, just because, similar thing with Sela, how not only have like much better DPSs come out, but also ones that are going to be able to perform better with less investment, and also for QQ's case, less RNG, because she is the RNG character here. I definitely do think it's fair that she's moving down, and I don't really see anything that's really going to make her go back up, especially as a 4-star. Like, we've seen a couple of 5-stars gain relevance again, like Jing Yuan now. We've seen Himiko with Pure Fiction, but I honestly don't think there's going to be something that will be enough to save QQ specifically from falling further as time goes on. Then lastly, for the DPSs, Misha moved down to tier 5. This is super valid for MOC. Misha is just such a weird character. He has a ultimate that can hit multiple times, yet he works the best in single target scenarios, which you are super rare to see. So because of that, it is tough for Misha to really do good anywhere. Now, if they had a game mode that was fully single target, maybe Misha could see some play because he can get some good freezes and everything. But in a lot of the content in the game right now, he is painfully mid. I'm not even gonna lie. So yeah, that's for the damage dealers, and then we didn't even see any changes for the specialist category either, so we can actually just jump right to amplifiers. So for the big man himself, Sunday, he does debut at tier 0.5, which I think is 100% fair, because his main archetype with the summon characters is not fully in the game yet. We do have, a few summon characters in Jing Yuan, Topaz, and Lingsha, but we don't have the Remembrance Path yet, which I think is really where he's going to shine. And I think that once we have that, I think we can see him going up to tier 0 alongside Robin and Ruan Mei, and having them be the Harmony triple threat up there. But with Sunday's inclusion and his similarity in certain ways with Bronya and Sparkle, I think Prydwen just decided to kind of reconfigure things, and they put Bronya and Sparkle down in tier 1, which when we're talking about non-summon teams, I think that Bronya, Sparkle, and Sunday have pretty similar performance. Obviously, with each of them having their own advantages, like Sparkle with the skill points, Sunday with the energy. So because they all have like their advantages there, it definitely is, just based on what your account has and what might be better for certain teams, you can use whichever of them. But once we start going into the archetypes, you're going to want Sunday for those summon archetypes. And then Bronya and Sparkle, when it comes to other ones like Break, they don't really have too much, value in. And then follow-up, there's just better follow-up supports, like you have Robin for that. You end up just kind of throwing them wherever for their action advance, or just using other supports more than them. So I think this is entirely fair for now, and I think that if we don't get anything that will kind of revitalize the way that we knew Hyper Carry to be before the 2.x updates, Bronya and Sparkle, they'll still be good, but I don't think they're ever again going to be one of the greats, which I think is the super important thing to really look at. Then lastly, let's talk about the sustains. There were 3 changes for sustains. There should have been another one, which we're going to talk about. I talked about it, I think, in one of the other videos too. Firstly, we have Lingsha moving up to tier 0, which I think is 100% fair. Not only is she part of 2 archetypes with being follow-up and summon, but she also is an amazing healer who can also be used as a DPS, which I think is pretty crazy. I may consider pulling her for her on her rerun, because I've seen some of the numbers she can put up. It's absolutely insane, and you can get some pretty interesting comps by running her as like your main carry, plus she's also sustaining you as well, which makes her a really strong healer, and I think that's going to be really good. Then in tier 0.5, we actually have Huohuo moving down from tier 0, and as good as Huohuo is, and I'm as glad as I am to have pulled her, comparing what she can do to Aventurina Linksha, I can agree with her being tier 0.5. She still performs extremely well, especially with her sustain, her energy for the entire team, her attack buff for the entire team. She can have some really solid value here. And I think that her being right below Aventurina Linksha is fair, because I just think their sustain and their abilities are just really solid overall. But the thing I don't agree with is that Fu Xuan has still not moved from tier 0.5. As much as I love Fu Xuan, as much as I have her E1, Fu Xuan I just don't think is on the same level as Huohuo. And them being in the same tier here, especially with how Quantum has been treated ever since like 2.x, Fu Xuan is not the vibe here. Like, she still is good. She has the crit rate buff for the entire team. I think she increases max HP as well. And also, it is very hard to get one shot. Obviously, there's places like Divergent Universe where it can happen, but while the time, it is very hard for Fu Xuan to get one shot. So she is still a very solid sustain, but I think that she's just not on the level of Huohuo and Gallagher. I think Fu Xuan should go down to tier 1, and Locha should go down to tier 1.5, because you have this whole gap here. That would probably be, that's how I would do it. But yeah, enough about Fu Xuan. Let's go down to the final change on the tier list, which is that Lynx has moved down to tier 2 alongside Japard. And I think this is fair, honestly, because this is I think tier 2 for the sustains, this is a tier of sustains that can do their job well, but outside of either very niche situations, or if at all, they just don't offer as much utility as the other ones here. Like, Locha has auto healing, so you rarely have to worry about like actually healing your characters. But then here, like, Japard just has really good shields, doesn't have the same it doesn't have the same utility as like Aventurine does. And then Lynx has alright healing and alright, utility and cleanse, but when it comes to that, Huohuo is way better at cleansing. Linksha and Huohuo are just better at healing. Gallagher also has a cleanse too. So this is pretty much just like if you are running them, they'll work, but there are better options that exist. So I'm perfectly fine with Lynx being down here overall. And then yeah, everything else has not changed for the list here. So overall, I think that the list itself is relatively good this time around. Now, it is kind of crazy to see Jingliu down here, of course, and of course I've had my thoughts on Fu Xuan being tier 0.5 as much as I've used her over time, but overall, pretty solid list here. I'm interested to see how it's going to progress, not just when Fugue comes out for the second half, but also once we start getting the Remembrance characters and seeing if Sunday is actually going to be moving up to S or to tier 0, which I think is very possible, but we're going to have to see what happens when that actually, when we actually get these Remembrance characters in here. But let me know what you all think. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed and want to see more content from me, be sure to hit that subscribe button. But with that, I will see you all next time.